He says the relationship between the U.S. and China remains a very strong one. Is that how you see it?
I may see a little more, let's say, dynamism in the U.S.-China relationship over strength. But thank you so much for having me. I think it is interesting. I mean, even when we think about how Secretary Bessent described exactly those trade talks, he seemed to say they didn't talk much about trade, that this was mostly about this TikTok framework deal. And even that alone speaks to, I think, some of the significant obstacles that stand in the way of a more stable U.S.-China relationship.
Henrietta, Xinhua, a Chinese newspaper, had put out the idea that part of those trade negotiations was bringing down barriers of investment to Chinese investors. Is the United States ready for more Chinese investment when it's been such a sticking point up till now?
Well, President Trump has expressed strong opposition and support for Chinese investment in the United States, at some times seeming to encourage Chinese investment and at other times describing it as a national security risk. And so I think that's part of why we're all watching so closely what this call between President Xi and President Trump that Secretary Bessent promised on Friday. If it happens, the Chinese have not confirmed it, but if it happens, that will be a very significant moment in the relationship because clearly Trump's mood, his perspective on his personal relationship with Xi can make a big difference in which direction he chooses to go among these somewhat conflicting China strategies that he seems to be pursuing sometimes at the same time.
Well, I'm confused, Henrietta, because there was another truth post from just 2 days ago in which the president of the United States called on European nations to stop buying oil from Russia. He says he's going to hold off on secondary sanctions until then. And in that same post, he says, I believe this plus NATO as a group placing 50 to 100% tariffs on China to be fully withdrawn after the war with Russia and Ukraine has ended will also be a great help in ending this deadly but ridiculous war. He goes on to say China has strong control, even grip over Russia, and these powerful tariffs will break that grip. Which side of his mouth is he talking out of here when he prepares to talk with President Xi on Friday? You can't have both, can you?
It's a very difficult needle to thread. It is good to hear President Trump raising concerns about China's decisive role in Russia's ability to continue fighting the war in Ukraine. China's systematic support for Russia in terms of financial support, evading U.S. sanctions, economic support, its support for the Russian military as well. I mean, this is what Putin needs to continue replenishing his forces when he takes battlefield losses. And so it's an important issue. It's hard to know whether President Trump is making a serious push in the G7 on this. I tend to think if he was serious, he'd be talking about financial sanctions, especially on Chinese banks, measures the Europeans have already started to move ahead with, those banks that are responsible for actually processing the transactions that allow Chinese goods to get to the Russian military. I think that would be a really important step. I worry that this talk about tariffs may not be serious. It may be intended more as short-term leverage in Trump's effort to get a better deal with China on unrelated issues. We've seen the U.S. is unable to sustain very high levels of tariffs on China, in part because China has so effectively retaliated with the choke points on rare earth exports. And so it's difficult to see how this would play out differently now that we're having the conversation in a G7 context.
Henrietta, I love that you hit that because it feels like one of the big narratives as well swirling around is that China has been preparing for this reality for months, years, if not decades, of kind of weaning themselves off economically of the American consumer. Ultimately, is China in a position where they can digest and continue to operate with 100% tariffs placed on them by President Trump?
I think that China's making the bet, and they may be right, that they can last longer. If Trump moves ahead with 100% tariffs, China retaliates with its own equal tariff rate, as well as we have to assume another round of restrictions on the export of rare earth magnets, earth materials. China thinks that they will hurt. They will take economic losses, but they'll take less than the U.S. And they think that politically they can absorb those losses longer and better than America can. And so they feel like they have the upper hand in any of these conversations around tariffs.
Assuming this meeting takes place on Friday, how low should our expectations be?
Always low. But it's still important. Whenever the leader of the United States and China speak, that's an important moment in the relationship, especially now that President Trump has taken such a personalized approach to U.S.-China relations. And of course, President Xi, for his part, has assumed an unprecedented degree of power within the Chinese political system. So it's important that they talk. It'll also be interesting to see how they both describe what was discussed. We remember the last time Trump and Xi spoke, the readouts from the two sides looked like they were referring to totally different conversations. And so that said to me that even though, it's good that they're talking, if they don't agree what they're talking about, that itself can become a point of tension down the line in the relationship.